The recorded history of the Middle East begins in ancient Mesopotamia, where human societies first transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to permanent settlements based on agriculture. By the late 4th millennium BC, the Sumerians in southern Mesopotamia had developed the world's oldest known urban and literate civilization. This early society pioneered many foundational technologies and institutions. They built the first cities, invented uniform writing, and established complex bureaucracies as well as legal codes. Nearby, ancient Egypt also emerged as a unified civilization around 3150 BC. Together, these societies marked out the Fertile Crescent, stretching from Mesopotamia through the Levant to the Nile, as home to multiple advanced cultures and what would later be called the cradle of civilization. Over the ensuing centuries, numerous empires rose and fell across the ancient Middle East. The Sumerian city-states were succeeded by the Achaemenid Empire around 2400 BC, which in turn gave way to subsequent Mesopotamian powers such as Babylonia and Assyria. These empires endured for over 1,500 years and dominated the region through military might, administrative innovation, and cultural sophistication. Meanwhile, in the Levantine corridor, the Phoenicians established several maritime city-states that traded extensively across the Mediterranean and developed an early alphabet, one that would become the foundation of the Greek and Latin scripts and ultimately the modern alphabet used in much of the world today. Farther to the east, during the 6th century BC, the Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great, conquered Mesopotamia, Egypt, and much of West Asia. This was a pivotal moment. For the first time, the disparate regions of the Middle East were united under a single imperial system, laying the groundwork for an enduring imperial tradition in the region. It was during this period of classical antiquity that the Middle East encountered a new set of cultural and political influences from the West. In 334 BC, Alexander the Great of Macedon invaded and ultimately overthrew the vast Persian Achaemenid Empire, which stretched from modern-day Turkey to Afghanistan. Though Alexander died in 323 BC and his empire quickly fragmented, his conquests introduced Hellenistic culture across the Middle East. Successor states like the Seleucid Empire in Syria and Mesopotamia and the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt preserved and adapted Greek culture, language, and governance. Major urban centers such as Alexandria and Antioch became hubs of Greek learning and multicultural exchange. This fusion of Greek and local tradition helped create a cosmopolitan environment that bridged East and West, facilitating the transmission of ideas, arts, and sciences that would resonate for centuries. As the Hellenistic kingdoms waned, the Middle East fell increasingly under the influence of another rising power, Rome. By the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic, soon to become the Roman Empire, had extended its reach into the eastern Mediterranean. Roman forces gradually annexed much of the region, including Asia Minor, the Levant, and Egypt, converting them into prosperous provinces of a vast imperial system. The Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability lasting roughly 2 centuries, brought economic integration, infrastructural development, and administrative cohesion. It was during this Roman era that one of the most consequential religious developments in world history occurred: the emergence of Christianity originating in Roman Judea during the 1st century AD as a reformist movement within Judaism. Christianity spread rapidly through the empire despite early persecution. By the early 4th century, the Emperor Constantine had embraced the faith and in 313 AD issued the Edict of Milan granting religious tolerance throughout the empire. In 330 AD, he founded Constantinople as a new imperial capital, and by the end of the century, Christianity had become the official religion of the Roman Empire, replacing classical paganism and profoundly reshaping the cultural and spiritual landscape of the Middle East. The transformation of the Roman world into a Christian empire marked a critical inflection point for both European and Middle Eastern history. Yet, the Roman hold over the region was never absolute. From the 3rd to 7th centuries AD, the eastern provinces of the empire, now administered from Constantinople and known as the Byzantine Empire, were locked in nearly continuous conflict with a revitalized Persian state, the Sasanian Empire. These two superpowers, Byzantine and Sasanian, divided the Middle East between them, with the Byzantines holding Anatolia, the Levant and Egypt, and the Sasanians ruling over Iran, Mesopotamia, and parts of the Arabian frontier. Their long-standing rivalry culminated in a devastating series of wars, culminating in the Byzantine-Sasanian War of 602 to 628 AD, which left both empires militarily exhausted and politically destabilized. This mutual weakening created a historic opening for a new force that would profoundly reshape the region. In the early 7th century, a revolutionary religious and political movement emerged in the Arabian Peninsula, Islam. The Prophet Muhammad, born in Mecca around 570 AD, began preaching in 610 AD, delivering a message of strict monotheism and social justice that drew from and reinterpreted earlier Jewish and Christian traditions. Muhammad's success in uniting the Arab tribes under the banner of Islam was unprecedented. Following his death in 632 AD, his successors, the caliphs, launched a series of astonishingly swift and successful conquests, filling the power vacuum left by the waning Byzantine and Sasanian empires. Within just a decade, Muslim forces had taken Syria and Palestine from Byzantine control, Egypt by the year 642, and had entirely dismantled the Sasanian state by 651. The Rashidun Caliphate thus emerged as a dominant imperial power controlling Mesopotamia, Persia, the Levant, Egypt, and extending from North Africa to the borders of India. These conquests were not only military achievements, but also marked the civilizational turning point. Islam became both a unifying religious identity and the foundation of a new imperial order. Arabic was adopted as their administrative language, gradually supplanting the Greek, Aramaic, and Persian previously used. Over time, most of the region's population came to speak Arabic and adhere to Islam, though Christian, Jewish, and other religious minorities continued to live under Islamic rule, often protected, but subject to legal and fiscal distinctions under the status of dhimmi. Following the rapid conquests, the Islamic world entered a period of political consolidation and cultural flowering. The Umayyad Caliphate, established in 661, with its capital in Damascus, presided over a vast empire stretching from Spain to the Indus River. The Umayyads built enduring monuments, such as the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, completed in 692, and expanded infrastructure and administration to maintain control over their diverse subjects. However, their rule was marked by tensions, particularly with non-Arab converts and supporters of the Shia branch of Islam, culminating in the Abbasid Revolution. In 750, the Abbasids overthrew the Umayyads and established a new dynasty, with its capital in Baghdad. Under Abbasid rule, the Islamic world entered what is often referred to as its Golden Age. Baghdad became a global center of learning, trade, and culture. The House of Wisdom, founded in the early 9th century, became a hub for scholars who translated Greek philosophical and scientific texts into Arabic, preserving classical knowledge and greatly expanding it. Advances were made in mathematics, algebra, algorithms, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and literature. Economically, the Abbasids benefited from their control over the Silk Road, facilitating connections between East and West. Culturally, their rule represented a synthesis of Arab, Persian, Hellenistic, and Indian influences, which fostered innovations ranging from the development of Arabic numerals to literary classics, like 1001 Nights. By the 10th century, however, the unity of the Abbasid Caliphate had begun to fragment. The sheer scale of the empire made it increasingly difficult to govern effectively, and regional dynasties began asserting autonomy, while still recognizing, at least nominally, the spiritual authority of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad. In Iran and Iraq, Persianate regimes like the Buyids came to dominate from the mid-10th century, while Turkish warlords, such as the Seljuks, rose to power in the 11th century, claiming to protect the Abbasid caliphs as military patrons. Meanwhile, rival caliphates emerged, most notably the Fatimids of Egypt, who established a Shia regime during the early 10th century, directly challenging Abbasid supremacy and illustrating the growing sectarian divisions within Islam. This period of political fragmentation also exposed the Islamic world to new external pressures. In the late 11th century, feudal lords and knights from Western Europe led a series of religiously motivated invasions known as the Crusades. These campaigns, which lasted until the end of the 13th century, led to the establishment of several short-lived Crusader states in the Levant, particularly in Syria and Palestine. Despite initial successes by the Crusaders, Muslim resistance gradually intensified. The Ayyubid dynasty under Saladin recaptured Jerusalem in 1187, and ultimately the Mamluks of Egypt emerged as the dominant defenders of the Islamic world, defeating the final Crusader strongholds by 1291. At the same time, a far more devastating threat emerged from the east, the Mongols. In 1258, Mongol armies led by Hulagu Khan sacked Baghdad, destroying the city and bringing the Abbasid Caliphate to a catastrophic end. The destruction of Baghdad, the intellectual and cultural heart of the Islamic world, marked a turning point. The Mongols went on to ravage much of Persia and Mesopotamia, but their advance into the Levant was halted in 1260 at the Battle of Ain Jalut by the Mamluks, who once again proved themselves vital protectors of the region. In the aftermath of Mongol devastation, the Middle East remained politically fragmented. The Mamluk Sultanate ruled Egypt and Syria, while in Persia, the Mongols established the Ilkhanate, one of several successor states to the Mongol Empire. In Anatolia, the once powerful Seljuk Empire had collapsed, giving way to a patchwork of smaller Turk principalities known as beyliks. Among these, one would eventually rise to prominence and establish a new imperial order across the region, the Ottoman Empire. Founded by the Turk chieftain Osman around the year 1300, the Ottomans began as a minor frontier state, but expanded steadily throughout the 14th and 15th centuries. In 1453, under Sultan Mehmed II, the Ottomans captured Constantinople, capital of the long-declining Byzantine Empire, renaming it Istanbul. This conquest was not only a symbolic end to the Christian Roman Empire in the east, but it also established the Ottomans as the premier power in the Islamic world. Over the next decades, they absorbed other Turkish and Islamic states, and in 1516 to 1517, Sultan Selim I defeated the Mamluks, bringing Egypt, Syria, and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman control. By the mid-16th century, under the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Empire had reached its zenith. It controlled all of Anatolia, most of the Arab world, including Iraq, the Levant, the Arabian Peninsula, and North Africa, as well as much of southeastern Europe. The Ottomans created a vast multi-ethnic and multi-religious empire that reintroduced a measure of imperial unity to the Middle East not seen since the Abbasid era. Crucially, this period also entrenched new geopolitical and sectarian divides. In the early 16th century, the Safavid dynasty arose in Persia, establishing Shia Islam as the state religion and forming an ideologically opposed polity to the Sunni Ottoman Empire. This Ottoman-Safavid rivalry would shape regional politics and sectarian identities well into the modern era, forming the roots of many enduring divisions between Sunni and Shia communities across the Middle East. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the Ottoman Empire stood among the most powerful states in the world. It controlled key trade routes between East and West, including the Silk Road and the Red Sea maritime routes, and major cities such as Istanbul, Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad thrived as centers of commerce, learning, and culture. The Ottoman administration used the millet system, which allowed a degree of religious autonomy for various communities, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and others. while the Sultan also held the title of Caliph, claiming spiritual leadership of the Sunni Muslim world. However, by the late 17th and into the 18th century, the empire began to experience a relative decline. Internally, it struggled with corruption, economic stagnation, and bureaucratic inefficiencies. Externally, European powers, particularly Austria, Russia, and later Britain and France, began to erode Ottoman territory and influence. The empire, increasingly seen as backward compared to rapidly modernizing European states, and the moniker the sick man of Europe. In response, a series of reform efforts, known as the Tanzimat, were launched in the 19th century. These reforms aimed to modernize the Ottoman army, civil administration, and society along European lines. While some successes were achieved, such as legal reforms and improved infrastructure, the reforms were uneven and failed to reverse the empire's strategic decline. Meanwhile, European imperial ambitions in the Middle East intensified. Britain established control in the Persian Gulf and gained significant influence in Egypt, especially after the construction of the Suez Canal in 1869, which made Egypt a crucial node in global trade. In the Eastern Middle East, Persia, modern-day Iran, remained formally independent, but came under increasing pressure from both Russia and Britain. The discovery of oil in the country in 1908 marked a turning point, inaugurating the petroleum age and drawing further Western interest. By the early 20th century, the Arabian Peninsula had become strategically significant due to oil exploration, positioning the broader Middle East as a region of vital economic and geopolitical importance. The final demise of the Ottoman Empire came with the First World War. In 1908, a reformist nationalist group, known as the Young Turks, seized power and led the empire into an alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary. The war proved disastrous. The Ottomans fought on multiple fronts against Russia and Anatolia, and against British forces in Arabia, Mesopotamia, and Palestine, and suffered devastating defeats. During the conflict, Arab leaders, particularly Sharif Hussein ibn Ali of Mecca, entered into negotiations with Britain, and in exchange for launching a revolt against the Ottomans in 1916, were promised support for an independent Arab kingdom after the war. However, these promises conflicted with other secret agreements. In the 1917 Balfour Declaration, Britain expressed support for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Meanwhile, the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, negotiated secretly between Britain and France, outlined plans to divide the Ottoman Arab provinces into zones of influence. By the war's end, the Ottomans had been defeated and the empire collapsed. The Treaty of Sevres in 1920 formalized the dismemberment of Ottoman territories, although the Turkish War of Independence soon led to the foundation of the Republic of Turkey in 1923 under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. In the wake of the First World War, the modern Middle East was shaped by European colonial powers. The League of Nations granted mandates that legitimized British and French control under the pretense of preparing territories for independence. Britain gained mandates over Iraq, Transjordan, and Palestine, whereas France took Syria and Lebanon, boundaries that roughly followed the Sykes-Picot Agreement. These artificial borders were drawn with little regard for the region's complex ethnic, tribal, and sectarian realities, sowing the seeds for many of the conflicts that would erupt later in the 20th century. The Arabian Peninsula followed a different trajectory. Britain had previously recognized the Al Saud family's rule over Central Arabia. Following their conquest of rival territories, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was established in 1932. Meanwhile, South Yemen remained a British colony, centered on the port of Aden. In Palestine, the contradictory promises made to both Jews and Arabs resulted in growing tensions. Increased Jewish immigration following the Balfour Declaration to escalating conflict between Jewish and Arab communities, foreshadowing the eventual and ongoing crisis over the future of Palestine. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, European powers maintained dominance across the Middle East, but anti-colonial sentiment and nationalism were steadily on the rise among local populations. Iraq experienced uprisings against British control and was granted nominal independence in 1932, though Britain retained military bases and significant influence. Similarly, Egypt, although technically independent since 1922, remained under de facto British control until after the Second World War. In Iran, which had never been formally colonized, British and Russian interference remained pervasive due to its vast oil reserves and strategic location. This interwar period also witnessed the emergence of new ideological movements, most notably Pan-Arabism, which advocated for the political unification of Arab peoples and the rise of nationalist parties seeking self-determination and an end to foreign domination. With the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, the Middle East again became a strategically vital theatre. The region witnessed intense fighting between Allied and Axis forces, particularly in North Africa and the Levant. The war further strained European imperial capacity and raised nationalist expectations as colonial rulers relied on local cooperation and made promises of post-war reform. By the end of the conflict, European colonialism was crumbling and momentum for independence was unstoppable. The first wave of decolonization between 1945 and 1950 saw Britain and France withdraw from Syria, Lebanon, Transjordan, and Iraq. In 1948, Britain completed its withdrawal from Palestine, but that departure precipitated one of the most enduring and volatile conflicts in modern Middle Eastern history. In the previous year, the United Nations had voted to partition Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. While the plan was accepted by the Jewish leadership, Arab leaders rejected it, viewing it as a violation of Arab self-determination. When Israel declared independence in May 1948, neighboring Arab states, Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, and Iraq invaded, triggering the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Israel not only survived the assault, but expanded its territory beyond the UN's proposed boundaries. As a consequence, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs were displaced, becoming refugees in surrounding Arab states. This deepened Arab resentment and solidified a conflict that would recur repeatedly in the following decades. In the post-war years, the Middle East underwent profound political transformation as colonial powers retreated and new nation-states emerged under the influence of post-colonial ideologies, especially Pan-Arabism. The most prominent proponent of this movement was Gamal Abdel Nasser, who rose to power in Egypt after a 1952 military coup and became president in 1954. Nasser's vision of Arab unity, socialism, and anti-imperialism resonated widely, culminating in the short-lived United Arab Republic, a union of Egypt and Syria from 1958 to 1961. His nationalization of the Suez Canal 1956 and the ensuing Suez Crisis, when Britain, France, and Israel invaded Egypt, elevated Nasser's status as a regional hero. Though Egypt's military performance was mixed, international pressure, particularly from the United States and the Soviet Union, forced the invaders to withdraw, a resolution notably championed by Canada's Lester B. Pearson, who is often credited with inspiring the concept of UN peacekeeping forces, which deployed to the region. This signaled the effective end of traditional European imperialism. Yet, despite its appeal, Pan-Arabism ultimately faltered. Ideological disunity, regional rivalries, poor economic outcomes, and critically failure to resolve the Palestinian question led to widespread disillusionment. This sense of failure was exacerbated after the 1967 Six-Day War, in which Israel decisively defeated Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, occupying the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and the Sinai Peninsula. The scale and speed of the defeat discredited Arab nationalist regimes and fueled the rise of Palestinian nationalism, led increasingly by Yasser Arafat, and the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO). In 1973, Egypt and Syria launched the Yom Kippur War in an attempt to reclaim lost territories. Despite early gains, the war ended in stalemate. However, the most significant consequence was a global oil crisis, triggered by an Arab oil embargo on the United States and other countries supporting Israel. This moment underscored the Middle East's growing economic and geopolitical importance, as oil became central to global power dynamics. Then, in 1979, two seismic events permanently reshaped the region. First, Egypt under President Anwar Sadat became the first Arab country to make peace with Israel, signing the Camp David Accords and regaining the Sinai Peninsula in exchange for diplomatic recognition. Second, and more consequential in long-term regional terms, was the Iranian Revolution. The overthrow of the Western-backed Shah and the establishment of an Islamic Republic under Ayatollah Khomeini introduced a radical model of political Islam. The revolution not only ruptured relations with the United States, but also challenged the secular Arab regimes and Sunni monarchies, igniting a new ideological rivalry across the region. In response to the perceived threat, Iraq's Saddam Hussein invaded Iran in 1980, initiating the Iran-Iraq War. The conflict was brutal and inconclusive, lasting 8 years and causing massive casualties. Iraq emerged from the war economically crippled, heavily indebted the Gulf Arab states, especially Kuwait. Consequently, in 1990, seeking to erase its war debts and control more oil reserves, Iraq invaded Kuwait. This aggression provoked the Gulf War, as a US-led international coalition swiftly intervened and expelled Iraqi forces in 1991. Though militarily successful, the war marked the beginning of a prolonged US military presence in the region, with American bases and arms partnerships expanding across the Gulf. This intervention also amplified perceptions of Western imperial overreach, particularly among Islamist groups. By the turn of the millennium, this deepening US presence was increasingly resented by some in the region, seen as an affront to sovereignty and an enabler of authoritarian regimes. This resentment helped fuel the ideology of radical Islamist groups, culminating in the 9/11 attacks in 2001, carried out by Al-Qaeda. The attacks prompted the US-led War on Terror, which turned the Middle East into its epicenter. After the invasion of Afghanistan, the US invaded Iraq in 2003 under the pretext of eliminating weapons of mass destruction and toppling Saddam Hussein. While his regime collapsed quickly, Iraq descended into sectarian conflict, with violence between Sunni and Shia factions intensifying and creating a fertile ground for extremist movements. This regional instability set the stage for the Arab Spring in 2011, a wave of popular uprisings demanding democratic reform and an end to authoritarian rule. The revolts began in Tunisia and quickly spread to Egypt, Libya, Syria, and beyond. Although Tunisia transitioned to democracy, most outcomes were bleak. Egypt's democratic experiment was short-lived, ending in a 2013 military coup. Libya and Yemen descended into chaos, and in Syria, President Bashar al-Assad's refusal to relinquish power led to a devastating civil war. The conflict displaced millions and became a proxy war involving Russia, Iran, Turkey, and Western powers, each backing opposing sides. Amid this chaos, a new jihadist force emerged, drawing strength from disaffected Sunni communities and the ruins of post-occupation Iraq. ISIS, or Islamic State, declared a caliphate in 2014, seizing large territories in Iraq and Syria. The group committed widespread atrocities and used online propaganda to recruit followers worldwide. By 2017, a combination of US-led airstrikes, Iraqi and Kurdish forces, and Russian and Iranian-backed Syrian forces succeeded in dismantling the group's territorial control, though it continues to operate as a regional insurgency. Throughout the 21st century, the region has also seen significant geopolitical realignments. Iran expanded its influence across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen through militias and proxy groups, forming a strategic corridor often dubbed the Sheer Crescent. This challenged the interests of Sunni powers, particularly Saudi Arabia and its Gulf allies, who viewed Iran's growing regional reach as a direct threat to their own security and ideological leadership. Iran's nuclear program, long a point of international contention, further heightened tensions. Although Iran insisted the program is for peaceful purposes, many Western and regional powers fear it could lead to the development of nuclear weapons, potentially sparking a regional arms race. Meanwhile, Turkey under Recep Tayyip Erdogan flirted its regional ambitions, pursuing an independent foreign policy, deploying troops in Syria, Libya, and the Caucasus, and frequently clashing with Kurdish groups seeking autonomy across Iraq and Syria. These competing spheres of influence between Iran, Turkey, and the Arab Gulf states have shaped a more multipolar Middle East, with shifting alliances and persistent rivalry underpinning much of the region's strategic landscape. Amidst these rivalries, however, some Arab states began re-evaluating their positions. In 2020, under US mediation, the Abraham Accords were signed, seeing the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco normalize relations with Israel. Shared concerns over Iran and frustration with the stalemate in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict were also key motivations, marking a significant shift in regional diplomacy. As of today, the Middle East remains a complex and contested geopolitical landscape. While some states, particularly in the Gulf, have seen rapid modernization and economic growth through oil wealth, tourism, and investment, others remain plagued by authoritarianism, corruption, and conflict. Deep-rooted sectarian, ethnic, and political rivalries persist, and the legacy of foreign intervention continues to shape popular attitudes and regional alignments. The region remains at a crossroads, rich in potential, yet burdened by a history of division, intervention, and unfulfilled aspirations.